Welcome into the College Football Power Hour on a week that we have the second round of the college football playoffs. Finally, Fitz, they are here. He's Jason Fitz. I'm Caroline Fenton. No Adam Brenneman today, but he'll catch up with us on New Year's Eve night after Penn State, Arizona State in the Fiesta Bowl. Hope everyone had a great holiday.
Wait, are we taking bets on that? Like, he's got to join us after the Penn State. So the first time we're going to talk to Carol, you're Caroline. The first time we're going to talk to Brenneman is right after the Penn State program that he knows better than anybody. He played for, plays in the college football. What could go wrong? It's going to be fun. It's going to be fun.
He's either going to be the world's grumpiest, poutiest man in America, as it's fresh if Penn State loses to Boise State, or he's going to be the happiest man in America, and trying to wrangle him and get on a microphone and get in front of a camera to talk about this game is going to be an incredibly difficult task because he's out celebrating and, still cheering in front of his TV. So truly nothing could go wrong. Great programming schedule on our end.
I commend him because, to be honest, look, I don't have a favorite college football team. We all know that. That's why I love covering the sport. But, look, if it was the Raiders in a playoff game, I'd just ditch work. I'd just be like, you know what, guys, I'm going to be too trashed. There's no way I can do it. Adam Brenneman, the consummate professional.
Maybe sometimes it's just therapy. Therapy one way or another. Therapy to be able to talk through how excited you are, or therapy to talk through everything that went wrong. But I'm glad we bring that game up because that's exactly where we're going to start. Penn State, Boise State in the Fiesta Bowl. Penn State, though, is an overwhelming favorite over Ashton, Jeanty and the number 3 Boise State seed. Early thoughts on this one, Fitz, because we saw Penn State absolutely dominate SMU in the first round of the playoffs. We saw State College was absolutely rocking. Penn State got off to a 14-point lead off of 2 pick sixes alone, and it was really kind of over from there. Different test now with Ashton, Jeanty and this Boise State team.
Yeah, but the funny thing is, and I hear this, I even saw Yahoo posted an article that was talking about how, count us out. Keep counting us out. Boise State and Arizona State telling the world, keep counting us out. All right, last time I checked, there was a coach from Indiana that did that right before they got their asses kicked too. Everybody's saying the right thing. There's a lot of bravado, but this is a bad matchup for Boise State. It's a bad matchup size-wise. It's a bad matchup up front. It's a bad matchup everywhere. Is
there a good matchup for Boise State in the playoffs, though?
There would have. Okay, so this is the great debate, right? Because as you well know, I think we're going to get a bunch of blowouts. I do. And I think we probably would have gotten better games weekend one if that would have been the time that we got SMU versus Boise State. Would have been a good game. I would have been excited to see SMU versus Boise State. The problem is I don't think it would have had nearly the cachet, amongst sports fans sitting there saying, oh my God, the college football playoff is here. I can't wait for SMU, Boise State. You know what I mean? So I'm glad we got the matchups we got. But no, the only way that Boise State keeps this game close is if they absolutely control time of possession with Ashton, Jeanty, which should be their goal, right? Their goal is to minimize possessions. And I always say this in particularly with certain running teams. We got to understand that their goal is to have as few snaps as possible, a few drives as possible in the game. So every single drive, you want to hold that thing as long as you possibly can. I think that's Boise State's only path here. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure Ashton Jeanty grinds out some yards in this because he's Ashton Jeanty and he's great. But this just feels to me like for a half, it sticks a little close. And then all of a sudden, before you know it, Penn State's up by 15. And I'll say the same thing here to you that I said to you about Tennessee. If Tennessee got behind big, they were absolutely done. If Boise State gets behind big, they're absolutely done, right? You can't be one-dimensional. So, that's why I'm concerned about a blowout here.
And that's exactly what we saw in Penn State in the first round of the playoffs. Like I said, once you hand Penn State 14 points on a silver platter, the game's over. Because with that defense, I didn't see that SMU team, and frankly, I wouldn't see this Boise State team being able to crawl out of that deficit. And I think Penn State's goal against Boise State, Penn State's goal probably against SMU, and probably for the remainder of the playoffs, if and when we most likely see Penn State in the college football playoff semifinal, is don't ask the offense to do anything. Don't ask Drew Aller to do too much. And he didn't have to do too much against SMU. That's the bread and butter for this Penn State offense. They don't have the same amount of talent on the outside at the wide receiver position that we see, obviously, at Ohio State or at Oregon or some of these other teams that we're going to see in the second round of the playoffs this weekend. But don't ask Drew Aller to do too much. How do you do that? You run the football effectively, you get the ball in the hands of Tyler Warren, and you play really good defense. And if Penn State's defensive objective is we are not going to let Ashton Jeanty absolutely run all over us, which we've seen is a lot easier said than done, to be fair. But this is one of the best run defenses in all of college football. That's Penn State's path.
To me, this also comes down to like where can you stress somebody, right? And so Penn State in this game, because of their defense, is going to be able to put stress on the one thing that Boise State does really well, which is run the football. So what's your counterpunch? There isn't a counterpunch here. And to your point, yeah, I don't think Drew Aller needs to be a life beater, like a world beater in this. He just needs to turn around and not screw this game up. And the funny thing is, I don't think that Boise State will be able to put enough pressure on Penn State to have to score a bunch of points to suddenly let this thing sort of spiral out of control. Like when we get to the Oregon-Ohio State game, I think what makes that game interesting is that both of these teams can just absolutely put pressure on you from a lot of different directions, right? They can beat you a lot of different ways. That's not going to be Boise State's MO. Their MO is to beat you one way. Now, it did almost work against Oregon, so we got to give them their props. Like Ashton Jeanty did have a big game. They almost beat Oregon. So, maybe if you're a Boise State team, you're sitting there saying, well, we almost beat the number one team in the country. We can certainly beat this Penn State team that at times looks like it has some limitations. But I just don't think that Boise State is the opponent. They can put enough stress on Penn State enough different ways to really make them go into their bag of tricks. And if you don't have to go into your bag of tricks in a football game, you're going to win.
Yeah, no doubt, 100%. And I do think I look at the pressure factor. I mean, it's intriguing to look at really in any matchup, but especially in the playoffs. And in this matchup, I think it's really intriguing. One, the pressure factor of Penn State against an opponent that we all view as inferior to Penn State. We all view this game, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, Fitz, but I think we think the same thing. This is a game that Penn State should win. That pressure factor of, James Franklin can't win in big games, which frankly I do think is an unfair narrative, because can he not win big games, or can he just not beat Ohio State and Michigan on a consistent basis? Like, those are two different things. Maybe they got that, kind of proverbial monkey off their back a little bit after winning that first round playoff game, a big game at home. But there's the pressure there for Penn State of, we need to win this football game. A different pressure that exists maybe than Ohio State or Oregon or Notre Dame and Georgia, the matchup that we're going to see on New Year's Day. It's, we have to win because we are a better team than this team. That's the pressure there for Penn State. I wonder what kind of pressure Boise State feels in representing the entire group of five. The pressure that they feel of, nobody believed that we should have been here anyways, and we want to prove those people wrong.
I feel like opportunity creates a different momentum than pressure. Because you say pressure representing the group of five. I don't think it's pressure because, okay, if they get their asses kicked, so what? A group of five team got their ass kicked. Like, I don't think it changes necessarily the way the entire group of five is viewed. But I think that if anything, Boise State gets this little extra turbo boost, right? This little extra kick from knowing, hey, we get to represent this entire group of people. It's like when you're finally standing up to the bully. It gives you all the momentum in the world. Now, that's great until the bully punches you in the mouth 3 or 4 times. You're like, oh, there's a reason that the bully, everyone was scared of the bully. I don't know how much it will actually play into the game. I think that there's astronomical pressure still on Penn State. Penn State fans are not going to be pleased with this playoff after one win if they lose to Boise State. This season, in my mind, will be viewed as a failure by Penn State fans if they lose in this game. So I think there's a ton of pressure on Franklin and Penn State. For Boise State, man, they're playing with house money. Nobody thinks they're going to win. Nobody ever respects the group of five. If they lose, oh, well, it was just a group of five losing. It was just Boise State losing. If they win, they've proven to the entire world that group of five belong. I do think, though, Caroline, there's a real conversation here about, like, we're masking over all of the issues that there were with the college football playoff this year and the seedings and the rankings and everything we talked about. How lucky was the college football playoff to have Boise State? Like, this is a legitimate football team that belonged in the college football playoff. We didn't have that conversation. Like, yeah, I know that they got a bye and some people maybe don't think they deserve to bye. But this is not your typical group of five team. Ashton Jeanty makes them different than most group of fives. Like, this is, if anything, I'd be worried for the group of five. I'm sitting here thinking, man, if Ashton, Jeanty, and this Boise State team can't even be competitive, can we ever be competitive? That's the long term. When we talk about narratives out of the first college football playoff, if Boise State gets struck by 40 in this game, then there's going to be a real narrative next year of, man, that Boise State team was better than most group of 5 teams, and they still got their ass kicked. Maybe the group of 5 doesn't belong in this thing. That's the inevitability long term if Boise State gets killed.
Same conversation that came out from the first round of the playoffs of, the importance of strength of schedule, that nobody believed Indiana should have been there anyway. Nobody believed that SMU shouldn't have been there anyway, myself included, but here they are and they get absolutely blown out. Now, I don't think that justifies saying, well, Indiana didn't belong because they got absolutely trounced at Notre Dame, because a lot of teams would probably get trounced at Notre Dame in a night game in the first round of the college football playoff, but that's going to be the narrative nonetheless. But it's a very good point you make about Boise State. And, I find it so interesting. EA Sports came out with this new initiative to kind of appeal to young sports fans. And it's more player motivated than it is team motivated, because young sports fans like players. They like individual personalities more than they feel an allegiance to a team. Having a star and a player that you can relate to and one player that you can point out in that roster, I think is so important really for any team. But an Ohio State, a Texas, a Georgia, you're going to have fans no matter what. It's the brand. Those brands carry themselves. The Boise State brand does not carry itself, but having a star in Ashton Jeanty makes it really easy to root for this team. And having a star in Ashton Jeanty makes it really easy to sell a brand like Boise State in the college football playoff and why they belong. And it's a great point, because Boise State is a top 10 team. Not in the seedings, but in the rankings. Boise State is a legitimate top 10 team. If we had the 12-team playoff last year, if I'm remembering this correctly, the group of 5 representative would have been like a 23rd ranked Liberty team. That team doesn't belong. This team belongs, group of 5 or not.
Yeah, think about if things had gone a little different. I know, as we said before, if a frog had a glass house, it would only jump once. But if things landed a little different at the end of the season, and we had UNLV, Tulane, Memphis, any of those sorts of teams in the college football playoff, would anybody be excited about this matchup? If we're being real, no. If it's an Ashton Jeanty-less Boise State, to your point, next year, nobody's going to give a damn about this matchup. This is sort of a seize it now moment for the group of 5, because you have this great player that everybody knows is transcendent, that can compete against the best of the best. You got to put up a good effort. When we start talking about the college football playoff, we need to understand that everything's sort of locked in until 2026, which means this is all sort of a petri dish of experimentation. If we're being real for a second, like they did the best they could to put together a playoff system, knowing that it was going to have to be tweaked. And I think it's taken a few months to sit here and say, well, I got to tweak this, got to tweak that. Well, do we want to put more home games in? Do we want to change the seeding process? Like, all of this is going to be analyzed. If the group of 5 goes in and just absolutely gets murdered in this game, you can't tell me that they're not going to go back to the drawing board at some point and say, hey guys, do we really need the group of 5? Like, the long-term conversation is going to be, are we happy that South Carolina, Alabama, Ole Miss didn't make it, but we're happy that, and then you'll insert group of 5 into that conversation, and we get one step closer to some mega conference Big Ten, SEC, exhibition essentially in this college football playoff. That's why I think it's important. If you ask me what I'm rooting for Boise State to shock the world. I'm rooting for Boise State to go out and at least take this thing to 6 overtimes, so that every single person that wants to have an argument for why they didn't belong will, politely shut up. That's what I'm rooting for. What I think is going to happen is we're all going to be sitting there on New Year's Eve trying to figure out, how soon we can make it out of the house, because of the third quarter, this thing's a blowout.
It's going to be a data point that I think we use for a very long time moving forward, whenever the college football playoff inevitably changes. If Boise State shocks the world, that's the data point, and that's the narrative moving forward of the group of 5 deserves to have a seat at the table, because Boise State beat Penn State, and any given Saturday, anything can happen. Or if that doesn't happen, and Penn State just absolutely obliterates Boise State, which there is a possibility where that happens. I'm not going to say that that's a probability, but there's a possibility where that happens. Then that'll be a data point of, do we really need them? Because we've seen it. We saw it with Cincinnati in the 14 playoff, and then we'll see it with Boise State in the 12-team playoff. That the team that even had a bye, that sat at home when Penn State was taking on an SMU, was a team that couldn't hang around for 60 minutes.
Can we talk about the most important part of this game now that we've broken down the game itself? Why the hell are they still playing games on New Year's Eve? Like, seriously. And you and I love this sport. You and I love covering this sport. It is absolutely wild to me and asinine to me that year in and year out, college football continues to try and prove that they can own a night that they simply don't own. I mean, the NFL can do whatever they want. We saw that. Look at it for all the college football heads that listen to this show. The college football playoff first round got killed by the NFL and the TV ratings. Shocking. What do you know? Like, the only games that were even remotely closer to the games that weren't up against the NFL. Let's understand that the NFL is like Pat McAfee at ESPN. They can do whatever they want. They can say whatever they want, and nobody's going to do a damn thing about it, right? Like, that's the NFL. So college football at some point has to understand that they are not the NFL, which means sometimes you got to play by the rules of society. You got to look around and got to read the room a little bit. A game on New every single time this happens, I sit there and say, how is it possible that people smart enough to run college athletics are too stupid to figure out you shouldn't put a game on New Year's Eve? Like, yes, the diehards will watch it, and the diehards will flock to it, and the diehards will get my mentions and yell, no, this is exactly what we want for people that don't want to go out, right? Fine. But playoffs in any sport aren't for the diehards. They're for the casuals. It's to get random people to pay more attention to your sport. Putting a playoff game in this first expanded playoff on New Year's damn Eve is so frustrating, because basically you're telling every casual to sit there and make a decision. You're going to watch, Dick Clark's rocking New Year's Eve or Ryan Seacrest rocking New Year's Eve. You're going to go out with your friends and your family. You're going to propose a toast. This game, if halftime goes long, won't even be done until 11:30. Like, what are we doing, college football, that we are putting a game as important as a playoff game at a time where casual fans simply won't pay attention? I hate this so much. It makes my blood boil every time they do it.
And it does feel to me, and if you feel differently, let me know, but it does feel to me that if you are a casual college football fan, Penn State, Boise State on paper feels like the most skippable.
Oh, God, yeah.
Like, if it was
100%.
Oregon, Ohio State, maybe we're talking about a different story. But college football, to your point, is not as if you build it, they will come as the NFL. Like, if the NFL wants to put their games on Apple TV Plus or, Nick Jr. Plus on, at 3:00 in the morning on a school night, they can do that because they will get 30 million viewers, just like they did on Netflix on Christmas Day. People aren't necessarily doing that for college football, but for a matchup of the magnitude of Ohio State or Oregon or Alabama, Georgia, like we had in the regular season, like, people will watch that game no matter what's happening or when it is. Penn State, Boise State isn't that kind of caliber.
Think about the watching experience, too. Like, Connecticut well, where I am right now.
Yep.
On a typical night, if there's a night football game, there are a dozen different bars in and around Connecticut. You can go out, text your buddies, be like, hey, let's go watch the Penn State Boise State playoff game. Let's meet at World of Beer, right? Like, everybody's going to go down. They're all going to meet. Everybody's going to sit around, right? Everybody's going to hang out. You're doing that on New Year's Eve? You can't do that on New Year's Eve because everything is ticketed. Every single one of these bars has got some sort of a huge, like, it's the reason why in the music industry, you can take whatever your usual show cost is to a venue, you can quadruple it, you can make it 5 times bigger because it's New Year's Eve, right? Everybody just goes to people flock to do regular things on New Year's Eve. So if you want to go out and have a communal watching experience on New Year's Eve with your buddies at the bar, you can't even do that. Like, even if you walk into the dive bar, shout out to Elmer's or Bar on Cedar, even if you walk into the dive bar in Connecticut, let's be real, even the dive bars are charging $50 a ticket with an all-you-can-eat buffet, so you can have a champagne toast at midnight. Like, college football has lost their damn minds.
Yeah, like, I'm not interested in a seafood tower and bottomless champagne, okay? Throw on Ashton Jeanty. Yeah, it is delicious. It's delicious. Yeah. But this is why we are voting for Jason Fitz for college football commissioner. I like having one standalone game and one game in each window the next day. I like that setup. I liked it with Notre Dame, Indiana. It felt right to have a game the night before, and it felt right that I didn't have to choose between a game and a certain slate the next day. But New Year's Eve's tough. You're going up against the NFL, you're going to lose. You're going up against Dick Clark, you're probably going to lose.
Yeah, New Year's, all they got to do, is put 3 games on New Year's Day and then take whatever they think the biggest game of the weekend is. In this case, it'd be Oregon, Ohio State. Put that on January 2nd. Let everybody use New Year's Day as the appetizer. Put the other one on January 2nd. Plenty of time for everybody to get ready for the next round of the playoffs. I'm the common sense college football playoff commissioner. I'll take the job. I'll take the job for 3 cents.
We don't do common sense in this sport.
Fair.
Why would we do that? Fair. Why would we do what makes sense and what everybody wants to do when we could do what doesn't make sense and do what everybody doesn't want to do? Obviously. All right, that's Penn State, Boise State. We've also got Texas and Arizona State kicking off the action on New Year's Day. This is another one. This feels kind of like a very similar matchup to Boise State for a few reasons. One, Boise State star running back Ashton Jeanty is Arizona State star running back Cam Skattebo. Like, that's the reason why a lot of people are going to want to tune in. That's the reason why I think a lot of people have tuned in. Whether you learned about Cam Skattebo in the middle of the season when Arizona State started to get hot, or whether the Big 12 title game was the first time you saw Arizona State, you pointed to Cam Skattebo and you said, oh, this guy's different. Like, I want to watch this guy. This guy is appointment watching, and we get to see Cam Skattebo again against one of the best defenses in all of college football. Texas is a very similar team to Penn State that you don't want to ask your quarterback to do too much. Texas is a very similar team to Penn State in that they are going to win games and have won games because of their defense, and they're in a very similar position, Fitz, where all the pressure in the world is on Texas to win this game, because on paper, Texas should win this game. The expectation is that Texas wins this game, but we do know football's not played on paper.
Yeah, thank God. But you're right. I mean, if I had to pick one of the games not named Oregon, Ohio State that could possibly at least make us still be interested at the beginning of the fourth quarter, I would love to justify this one being that. Arizona has shown a lot more balance over the last couple of weeks. As our buddy Adam Brenneman has pointed out, Arizona State has more size than we give them credit for on the defensive line. I'll give them credit for all of those things. But we know what this really comes down to. This has nothing to do with Arizona State. This entire game has to do with one thing. Will Texas run the football efficiently? If Texas runs the football efficiently, this thing's over. And Arizona State's going to put every single resource they have into trying to slow down that running game. And if they can, then Quinn Ewers is going to have to step up and he's going to have to play really well. As we all know, he's banged up, mighty banged up, right? So the question is, what version of Quinn Ewers can they even get in this game? I don't think they're going to have to know. So far, the common theme from the 2 games that we've broken down, this one and Penn State, the common theme is that I believe that both of the favorites' defenses are so good. The fact is you're simply just not going to get enough points on them in this matchup to really put stress on the opposing offense. And that's a real difference maker. If Texas can't run the football, I think that's going to be concerning for the playoffs moving forward, but I think they'll be able to run the football in this matchup, and that's why I think Texas is going to win by 3 scores. I'm not trying to be a broken record, y'all. Like, I want to find a way to make these games sexy because it makes our job better. I don't really know how a game could be sexy, but it makes our jobs better. It's more fun to give you compelling, oh my God, this could come down to the wire. I don't see it here. There's grown-ass men on the defensive side of the ball at Texas that will control the line of scrimmage.
Arizona State's offense can beat you in several different ways. It's Cam Skattebo, obviously, that dominates the conversation, and it should. He has deserved that. He has deserved the biggest portion of the conversation about this Arizona State team. But I think that Sam Leavitt, their quarterback, might be the most underrated in all of college football. That's different than being the best quarterback in all of college football. Do not get that twisted, but I think he is the most underrated. I do not think that Sam Leavitt is a household name amongst casual college football fans, but he has played like a guy that deserves for his name to be known. He takes care of the football. He's able to distribute the football to several of his different playmakers, and I think that really showed in the Big 12 title game when their number 1 receiver, Jordan Tyson, was out. And he was still able to get, 7, 8 different receivers involved. And to add context to that, Jordan Tyson was their leading receiver by a landslide. Second leading receiver was Cam Skattebo, the running back. And there were several different guys that were able to kind of emerge in that game and step up in that game. A different test versus Texas than it was against Iowa State. No doubt. So if Texas says we're not going to let Cam Skattebo beat us, I do think that there is a path where Sam Leavitt and this core of wide receivers can beat you. Can they beat Texas? That's a completely different story. because I don't see very many offenses in college football being able to dominate those matchups mano-a-mano, my guy versus your guy against this Texas defense. They are just so good and they are so deep.
I want to stress here, I agree with every single thing you just said about Arizona State. I agree with giving Levitt his flowers, and I agree that they throw the ball a lot better than they're getting any credit for, right? I agree with all of that, and it's not going to help in this game. There are only a handful of defenses in the country that I think are as scary as Texas. And as much as we sit here, and I'm not having the same conversation about who did Indiana play. I'm not having that. But I just want to be very clear that what Arizona State has faced this year has not been anything like what they're going to face defensively in this matchup. That's just fact. There are a handful of defenses that scare me. And guess what? They're playing this weekend. Like when you talk about, if we had to sit here and say, all right, Caroline, if I just said I am frightened, like I am Halloween scary movie horror franchise frightened by this team's defense, well, I would put Texas on that list. I would put Georgia when they play the way they're supposed to play on that list. I would put Notre Dame the way they're playing on that list. I would put Penn State on that list. See the thread, the way Ohio State played last week, frankly, I would put Ohio State's defense the way they played last week on that list. You go up and down the list. Like this isn't about what Arizona State is lacking. This is about what Texas does so stinking well. And the other part about Texas is they just don't commit a lot of unforced errors on the defensive side of the ball. And I'm not talking about penalties. I'm talking about communication. Like how often, if you go back and watch Texas this year, how often did you see the back end of the defense wildly out of position on a busted play? It just doesn't happen, right? So this defense is fundamentally sound. They're deep, as you mentioned. They're huge. They're fast. They fly to the football. Like this is about Texas's defense being just absolutely on another level. And it's no disrespect, truly. Everybody wants to make these things about like, you just don't respect. I respect the heck out of what Arizona State has done this year. And I think Arizona State's offense, as it's clicking right now, like Arizona State to me would have beaten Indiana in the first round. They would have beaten SMU in the first round. I think Arizona State, as it sits right now, would beat Boise State. They are a deserving opponent. The problem is they just ain't going to beat Texas.
Their defense, Texas's defense, rather, doesn't make a lot of mistakes. The offense does.
Yeah, that's right.
Turn the football over. And Quinn Ewers can look like the best quarterback in the country at times. Like when he completed his first 8 passes against Clemson, and then his 9th pass attempt was an interception. It was tipped. I will give him credit where credit is due, but
I can hear Brenneman screaming all the way from wherever he is right now. You guys are too tough on Quinn Ewers. I don't know why that's my Brenneman impersonation, but
it's
you
not
guys are too tough
on
Quinn Ewers. I'm just saying, like, I can hear him yelling it. I think we are sufficiently tough on this show on Quinn. You don't get to come into the season as a hype. Go back and read your way too early NFL mock drafts from July and tell me what quarterback was at or near the top of the list. What quarterbacks? Quinn Ewers, Carson Beck. Everybody wanted to try and make those two the top 2 quarterbacks in this year's draft. They have both disappointed to the expectation. I think that, and when what you're saying is so right. Like, look, I was a little brother. And I won't throw my buddy under the bus, but I have a buddy that played for the Tennessee Titans for years. And we would go into bars when I was younger and dumber. And I would talk my talk. And I would, like, because I knew I had like 3 Titans behind me. Like, what are you going to do about it? And there was a period in my younger, more aggressive years where my buddy finally looked at me. He's like, man, I'm not going to go to bars with you if I got to keep bailing you out. That's the Texas offense and the Texas defense. The Texas offense is coming in and it's like, we're going to kick your ass. And then they just screw everything up. And the Texas defense comes in and says, don't worry, little brother. I will take care of this thing.
I got you.
You're not wrong. That Texas offense, man, it talks that talk. It just doesn't walk that walk.
Which is wild that we're talking about a Texas offense with a 3-year starter at quarterback, the most famous backup quarterback in all of college football. You've got 2 legitimate starting running backs. You've got a room of about 7 future NFL wide receivers. And oh yeah, by the way, your head coach is one of the most brilliant offensive minds in college football, but you're going to win the national championship because of your defense, if you do in fact win the national championship.
Man, that speaks to the development, by the way, that's still happening for Texas. Texas is one of the rare programs in college football that we can say, like, we can honestly look at a camera and say, hey, they are winning now and they're positioned to continue winning, not because they're going to go hit the transfer portal or they're going to go recruit these, because they have guys right now on the roster that are going to step up. Next man up exists for Texas. They are so talented, but they're young in some of those spots.
No doubt. No doubt. And if there's any theme that I take away from, obviously, these two games that we just talked about, but really the playoffs as a whole, run the ball and play good defense. That's exactly the recipe for success for both Texas and Arizona State and Penn State and Boise State. Run the ball, play good defense. Quick break here. Granddaddy of them all coming up next.
Introducing Daily Draw, the latest free-to-play game from Yahoo Sports. Daily Draw gives you a pack of 6 prediction cards every day based on the day's biggest sporting event. Download or update the Yahoo Sports app on the Apple App Store or Google Play and join the action with Daily Draw today.
When we were talking about the 12-team playoff and the first couple of iterations of the rankings Fitz, I talked about how I don't need to see Georgia, Texas again, because we saw that in the regular season, and then we saw that in the SEC championship game. Both very fun football games, and both close football games, at least at times. I didn't need to see it again. I have no issue at all seeing Ohio State and Oregon again. I have no issue at all seeing that matchup, and to just add a little fun little sprinkle on top, it's in the Rose Bowl. Like Ohio State, Oregon in the Rose Bowl. It feels so right.
I mean, this is by far the best game that we have gotten so far. I think this might end up being the best game we get in the college football playoffs, all the way up to a championship. This thing just feels like two juggernauts headed for a absolute battle. And all I keep thinking about, Caroline, this is recency bias, but all I keep thinking about is the way Penn State ran the football on Oregon. You can't tell me that Ohio State hasn't been chopping that film up over and over and over again, sitting there saying, how do we do that? How do we do that? Because guess what? Ohio State's got the guys, certainly running back to do it. This all comes down to, look, I'm 5'9", 160, 162 this week. The hell do I know about offensive linemen? Here's what I know. When I talk to my big boys that played offensive line at the highest possible level, they'll all tell you that the biggest problem that Ohio State has had at times this year is the revolving door at offensive line. Part of that problem is that they've had to move guys within the offensive line to different positions on the offensive line, which creates multiple points of weakness on the offensive line. These have all been real things. And when you start talking to guys that played that and they tell you, the issues, what they will also tell you is that those issues weren't in the last game for Ohio State, right? Ohio State's offensive line is going to be whether or not they win or lose this football game. If their offensive line comes out, is healthy enough to withstand an actual full game, they're able to actually play, I think they've got a shot in this game. If Ohio State starts shuffling people midway through and you start seeing them having to pull a guard over to tackle because they're going into the depth chart, they're done. And this Oregon defense better have spent the last couple of weeks figuring out how to fix whatever their run deficiencies were, because if they didn't, Chip Kelly will just run. Chip Kelly wants to run the football. He will run the football down Oregon's throat over and over and over again.
Chip Kelly wants to run the football, but part of me wants to say, Chip, just throw the football. You have 3 of the best receivers. You have the best wide receiver room in all of college football. You have 3 of the best wide receivers in college football.
You have 3 guys we're going to see on Sundays. We're going to be sitting here saying, wait, those guys were on one team? Especially if they didn't win an Natty.
Jeremiah Smith would be wide receiver 1 on more NFL teams than he wouldn't. He would be wide receiver 1 on NFL teams not named the Minnesota Vikings, the Cincinnati Bengals, and the Detroit Lions and the Philadelphia Eagles. Am I missing someone? He would be wide receiver 1 as a true freshman in college football in the NFL on a majority of NFL teams. That's why it was so frustrating to me watching Ohio State play Michigan and wanting to run the football, being persistent with running the football and not having success running the football and not throwing the ball. You're not going to out Michigan, Ohio State. No matter how much better you are than Michigan in so many different ways, you're not going to out Michigan them. So why are you doing that? The way that I feel about Ohio State today is drastically different than the way I feel about Ohio State after that Michigan loss. Because I thought this just feels like This feels like it's a very good team that's going to fall short of expectations. One, because of the offensive line, and two, because we didn't see Will Howard play very well against Michigan. And then we saw the most expert game plan that we saw in all of the college football playoffs so far when Ohio State played Tennessee. When Tennessee has the deepest, in my opinion, defensive line in all of college football, and they were basically rendered useless because the offensive line protected Riley Leonard, because Riley Leonard got the ball out, because Ohio State said, our wide receivers will beat your DBs every single play, and we feel incredibly confident about that. And they did win those matchups. That we saw the Ohio State team that we expected to see all season long against Tennessee. And I stepped away saying, that is a national champion team. Like, if they play like that, if that is the game plan, they can beat anyone in the country.
Here's the thing, though. In all of this, we sit here and we talk about Ohio State, Ohio State, Ohio State. It's what we're all doing. Did I miss something? Like, Oregon's the number one team in the country. Oregon's the only thing in a wild, chaotic year in college football. The only thing we could count on is Oregon was going to find a way to win every game. And that in and of itself, I mean, we need to step back a little bit and just ask ourselves, are we giving? Because here's the thing. I'm guilty of it. In this show, man, Oregon's got to figure out how to fix that run defense. I've already said that. How many times? All right, well, Oregon also turned around and said, okay, if we got to win a 45-42 shootout to win the Big Ten, we can do it. Like, Oregon already figured out how to survive Ashton, Jeanty. We talked about that earlier. Like, this is an Oregon team that has beaten everybody you put in front of them. And
Ohio State
Dylan
included.
Gabriel, Ohio State included, like, go up and down the list. They've already won these games this year. Like, and then think about how well Dylan Gabriel has played and how sort of off the radar it's been. I don't remember the last time we had a number one team in the country that was getting this little respect from the world coming into it. And it just feels like they're not. We've all forgotten Oregon in this process. This is a big, and you can't tell me that Dan Lanning, who is one of the best motivators in all of sports, I'm not just talking football. You can't tell me that Dan Lanning isn't showing this to every one of those guys. Like, you want to talk thunder of the gods? Oregon's going to come out with the thunder of the gods because nobody's talking about them. They're the number one team in the country, and nobody is talking about them.
I do think part of that is recency bias because we didn't see Oregon last week and we did see Ohio State. And you know this, Fitz, sports in general, but football, NFL, college football, whatever it is, it's a what have you done for me lately league. What Oregon has done for us lately is give up 520 total yards to Penn State in the Big Ten title game. What Oregon has done for us lately is give up 120 rushing yards to Katron Allen in a game that they won, by the way, okay? But when you're at the top, you're held to a different standard. That even when you win a game and when you're undefeated and you won your conference championship in a conference that had more representatives than any other conference in college football in the college football playoffs, you are held to a different standard, and we will pick them apart under a microscope. And I think it's fair to do that whenever you give up as many yards as Oregon did against Penn State in the Big Ten title game. And the last time we saw Ohio State was the best performance we may have seen all season long from any team.
But the counter to that is that the worst we've seen, the absolute worst we've seen from Oregon is at times against really good opponents, they give up too many points, too many yards. That's real. In games they won. Yeah. The worst we've seen from Ohio State is Will Howard melting down and suddenly they're just having a massive brain fart as a team and they get their asses kicked by their biggest rival. Like, that's the worst we've seen from Ohio State. Like, the worst we've seen from Penn State is that, frankly, the same Ohio State team that Oregon found a way to beat, Penn State found a way to lose too. Like, the worst we've seen from Boise State was an inexcusable loss. Like, it's just not inexcusable, but a loss. Like, go up and down the list. Like, the worst we've seen from every other team in the college football playoff resulted in an L. The worst we've seen from Oregon was that, man, they were really taxed in a win over a good team. Like, this is the anti-Indiana in this conversation. Yeah, they gave up too many yards to college football playoff teams. They gave up too many points to college football playoff teams, but they've already beaten 3 teams in the college football playoff.
It is fair. And I don't want this to get misconstrued as disrespect for Oregon because...
No, I'm not accusing you of that, but...
And it's a fair point to bring up because we're not talking about Oregon the way that we normally talk about number 1 overall seeds and the way that we talk about teams that went undefeated in the regular season. But I think it's because Oregon's not one of those teams. Like, I don't view Oregon in the same light that I viewed Alabama in 2020 or LSU in 2019. Or so many times throughout history in college football, there is one team or maybe even two teams that are so obviously better than the rest, that stand above the rest, that feels like their margin for error is so much larger because they're just that much better than you. We don't have that team in college football. We can look at the college football playoff and we can look at the entire top 25 and kind of nitpick all of the reasons for confidence and very fair reasons for concern about a lot of these teams. Every single team in college football this year has a weakness, Oregon included. And that's unique this season. So I think that's the reason why we're not talking about Oregon in the same light. And also because we've seen Ohio State play to a certain level that feels unbeatable.
Yeah,
they have to play to that level. They don't always play to that level.
And certainly what Ohio State's, makeshift offensive line did against Tennessee, who I had so much respect for, is real. I mean, that is Tennessee's defensive line was a non-factor in that game. And I think we both know that was a huge part of it. I give you all of that. I think you're 1,000% right here that it's interesting to me because in a 50-50 matchup, in a toss-up, typically, the question always becomes, well, which coach do you trust more and which quarterback do you trust more? So I guess I ask you, is there a reason that we don't trust Dan Lanning and Dylan Gabriel, who's played a ton of college football, and this year has just avoided big mistake after big mistake? Dylan Gabriel has had some games that, I've had to come on the show and say, well, I don't, he got away with a couple of throws there, but at least he got away with them. Well, Howard's had games where he came out and was like, please, sir, would you like a touchdown? I would like to give you a touchdown. Please, sir, I would like a deficit. We would like to make this interesting for everybody. We're going to give you a pick six, and we'll just see where it goes. And we all know that big game Ryan Day, we just saw big game Ryan Day and big game Chip Kelly absolutely implode. I think here, all things being equal, yes, it is absolutely fair to say that, and I do believe Ohio State's going to put up points. They're going to run the football. They're going to be able to do those things. The question is, can Ohio State stop Oregon from doing the same? I don't think so. I think this is going to be a hell of a game, but I think Oregon's going to come out of this and we're all going to have a different level of, oh, wow, maybe we've been sleeping. Maybe Oregon is clearly the number one team here because you're right. They're not dominant like Alabama. They're not dominant like some of the best teams we've seen. Oregon to me is like the guy that won Squid Games. You don't know how they got out of it, but they got out of the wildest season we've ever seen in college football somehow. So take the briefcase, take the money. Congratulations, you won.
Coach quarterback, very much so advantage Oregon. But the two things that we just talked about that are going to be the most important thing for every single team in this playoff, defense and run game. And that, I think I defer to Ohio State. But it's close. It's a lot closer than it is with coach and quarterback and that trust level. I will give you that. All right, final game of the second round of the college football playoffs. Notre Dame and Georgia. Another game that just feels right, doesn't it? If we had a 4-team playoff this year, those two matchups, Ohio State and Oregon and Notre Dame, Georgia, feels like a 4-team college football playoff. Feels like what we should have gotten, what we deserved as college football fans if we just had 2 games and 4 teams in this college football playoff. But the biggest story of this game is what we learned earlier last week. Now, Carson Beck will be out for the remainder of the playoffs. He underwent a successful UCL surgery, so he will be out until reportedly spring of 2025. And he also announced on Saturday night that he is heading to the NFL draft. So it's Gunnar Stockton, their backup, getting his very first college start in the college football playoffs against one of the best defenses in the country. Good luck, Gunnar.
This is where we got crushed. I got crushed on social media for sitting here saying, there are Georgia fans all up in my mentions telling me that this team is better with Gunnar.
Do not give me that.
They're all
not.
Everyone's trying to tell me, no. He was a highly recruited and, he's more versatile and it's going to mean, Carson Beck was only in because they were paying respect to the guy that's giving them but no, there's going to be a better team. That's what Georgia team fans are telling me all over the place.
Save it.
And I look at that and I think, you know what? You are presuming that somebody that we've never seen is going to come in and just absolutely destroy a defense that we've seen play really well. You're presuming, and maybe I'm guilty of presuming it won't happen, but more often than not, erring on the side of first-time starter isn't going to kick the snot out of national championship contender seems like a pretty fair bet to me. I guess I would just ask everybody, would you bet your house on it? Georgia fans that are in my mentions telling me that he's going to be so much better and that this offense is going to be better. Would you genuinely bet your house on it? Would you bet your house that suddenly by changing quarterbacks, your wide receivers are going to stop dropping the football? Would you bet your house on the fact that now you're going to get more efficient play from the quarter? Would you bet your house on somebody you'd never seen walk up to the line of scrimmage, start a game against a national championship contender when the playoffs are on the line? And I think if we injected truth serum in that fan's veins, all of those fans' veins, we'd get the answer to that. No, you wouldn't bet your house on it. I get hope. Of course you want to hope. Your favorite team's in the college football playoffs, and you've got your backup quarterback. You want hope. I get it. I just don't have that hope for Georgia. I think Notre Dame's going to roll here. Notre Dame's defense is so good. It is so good. We talked about speed. We talked about their ability to influence tight window throws. Like, you have to be perfect against this Notre Dame defense, and I don't believe Georgia can be that. Georgia's defense is going to make it ugly for Riley Leonard. I will give you that all day long. But man, now we're going back to which quarterback can I trust? Which quarterback coach tandem can I trust? I'll give the advantage on the coaching side, obviously, to Georgia. But the advantage on the quarterback side is squarely at Notre Dame.
You call it hope. I call it maybe a little bit of cope. Because two things can be
That's
true.
Well said.
That Carson Beck played really poorly at times this season. That Carson Beck turned the football over way too many times. That is true. I acknowledge that. We are on record saying that Carson Beck needs to do more. We have criticized Carson Beck just as much as the next person on this show. It's also true that even with the flaws that we've seen of Carson Beck this past season, he's still a guy that you would rather have over a guy that's attempted 51 passes in his 2-year career. A guy that hasn't seen a lot of football. That the most that we've seen of Gunnar Stockton is a half against Texas, where he looked really good at times, and he looked really bad at times, throwing an atrocious interception in the final couple of minutes of regulation. You can't do those kinds of things against teams like Notre Dame, and to be fair, like they did against Texas, and expect to win. Now, Gunnar Stockton got bailed out by Georgia's defense and held Texas to a field goal rather than a touchdown and took it to overtime. And they got bailed out by the run game and the defense consistently against Texas, where Gunnar Stockton maybe could have made some of those mistakes late in the game, and they didn't necessarily matter because Georgia still found a way to win. I don't know how consistently you can do that against defenses that you're going to see in the college football playoff and expect to win. I will take the quarterback that has seen and played more football over the devil that you don't know, and that is Gunnar Stockton. And look, I understand Gunnar Stockton was very highly recruited. I understand Gunnar Stockton has got some wheels to him, that he adds a different element to this offense that maybe we didn't see from Carson Beck. I saw the energy that Georgia played with when Gunnar Stockton came in because they believed in him, and that was their guy. That's not to say that they don't believe in Carson Beck and that Carson Beck isn't their guy, but it did feel in the SEC championship game that this Georgia offense played with a little bit more swagger and electricity when Gunnar Stockton came in. Those things are valuable, and those things are telling, and those things are important. But when your back is against the wall, and this Notre Dame defense is flying around, when Gunnar Stockton just doesn't have the same experience level as Carson Beck, we could see that come to fruition against Notre Dame, and that could be the difference in this game. So don't give me the Gunnar Stockton is better than Carson Beck. We're better off without Carson Beck. Save it.
Let's rewind this show all the way back to our preseason picks in August when we first started. And one thing that I yelled and screamed at the time, that I've been yelling and screaming since the season started, is when we got to the college football playoff, you were going to want quarterback experience because this is unprecedented. You want experience. Part of the reason that I was uncomfortable with Tennessee was Nico Iamaleava doesn't have a lot of experience. We've been having this conversation for months. Experience matters. And there's another thing here. I'm going to get in the weeds for a second, Caroline, but like this is my favorite nerdy fact that I didn't know until I started doing this for years. And I mentioned this before, but I've got a friend that was a former NFL head coach. And when he was done being an NFL head coach, he became part of a coaching staff at the NFL, and he's an advanced coach, like an advanced scout coach. So his whole job was to coach the team that was coming in 2 weeks. His whole job was to scout the team that was coming in 2 weeks. So break down the film, figure out those strengths and weaknesses, figure out everything you need to know. I think there's an important point here because every coaching staff at college and the NFL has somebody that is scouting your next opponent. So they essentially can give the coaching staff a dossier and say, hey, here's who's upcoming. Let's acknowledge something here. The Georgia coaching staff had to work up film for the last week or before the playoff game. They had to work up film to start to advance scout both Notre Dame and Indiana, just in case. That's the way that went, right? If you are Notre Dame, ever since you got into the college football playoff, ever since you knew you qualified, you have a whole room of coaches that nobody ever talks about that's only job has been to scout everything that Georgia does. That because they knew that would be their second round opponent if they got to the second round. They have spent weeks, I promise you, looking at every piece of high school tape they can get on Gunner, looking at every piece of college tape they can get on Gunner. This was no secret that Gunner was going to be the quarterback. So my thing is that Notre Dame, a really well-coached and good defense for Notre Dame, has had coaches looking at Gunner for 2 weeks. They're going to show him things he's never even thought of. They are going to show him looks he's not ready for. There's no way they have an advantage because they knew what their second round opponent was going to look like. The advanced scouting has already been done. They were already ready to implement a game plan. They have days of game planning for Gunner. I just think this is a huge advantage that we don't think about in the playoffs, particularly because they've had weeks to get ready for him. So whatever wrinkle he offers as an athlete and all of the film that exists in the Rivals database and things like that, what do you think the Notre Dame coaches have been living, eating, breathing? Not the coaches on the sideline, the extra coaches that sit in the back. They have been living, eating, breathing, absorbing every ounce of that. They're going to be ready for it. I hate this for Georgia fans. I truly do, because it sucks to make the playoffs and then realize that your backup quarterback is going to be the one that has to have a Herculean lift. But for Georgia to have a chance in this game, I believe that Gunner's going to have to put up 25 plus points with this offense. And I don't believe that Gunner can do that. I don't believe this defense will be got by Gunner in that way. And that's why I think Notre Dame rolls in this game.
And to be fair, not only have Notre Dame coaches been preparing for the last few weeks for Gunner Stockton has also had the privilege of staying home last week and being able to practice with his receivers and watch film, nitpick every single second, every single snap from the SEC championship game. That he's had those weeks to prepare too. The Georgia's offensive coordinator, Mike Bobo, has had those weeks to prepare for Gunner Stockton as well. That's not just a Notre Dame thing, but I talked with Pete Sampson, who covers Notre Dame for The Athletic. He knows that team inside and out, that roster inside and out. And I asked him about kind of like what at least the fan perspective is. In that locker room, those conversations are different, but what the fan perspective is from Notre Dame, and whenever the news was announced that Carson Beck would not be playing, and he said, look, we understand that there are very few breaks to be had in the college football playoff, but the fans do kind of feel like they got a little bit of a break and getting the backup over the starter, and I think that is a fair feeling to have. But I will say, I picked Georgia to go to the national championship game before the college football playoff. I think I picked Georgia to go to the national championship game even before the season. Throughout the season, I learned that this is still a national championship team, but it's just for a different reason than I initially thought. I initially thought it would be because of the experience level on this team, Carson Beck included. Now I realize that Georgia's a national championship team not because of the quarterback. It's because of the level of play of the defense and how well they run the football. Again, to go back to the theme of the day, but it's really, for Georgia, the number one thing, number 1A, how good can this defense play? Because Carson Beck turned the ball over 3 times against Texas in the regular season, and Georgia still won because of how good their defense played. So I think that, yes, Notre Dame did get a break in getting the backup quarterback, because I think that is a thing, and no matter what matchup it is, no matter what game it is, no matter what teams are participating. But Georgia can still win this football game because their defense plays at a championship level, or can play at a championship level. But we've also seen them play at not a championship level. They've been playing wildly inconsistent all season long. So that's what it comes down to me. Which Georgia defense do we see against Notre Dame on New Year's Day? Quick break here. Crash out, cash out coming up next. Crash out or cash out? Ashton Jeanty, over under rushing yards set at 130.5. What are you taking there, Fitzy?
Oh, this one's tough. Vegas isn't wrong. They built those big casinos for a reason. They make all the money. I'm going to take the over on this. It's going to take a lot of carries to get there. I mean, this feels like Ashton Jeanty has 36 carries for 132 yards. Like the Ashton Jeanty on his 42nd touch of the game. Like this just the offense is going to go through him. 130 and a half feels about right. I will take the over. If that number had been 140, I would have taken the under. That's kind of how crazy right it feels. So I'll take that. What about you?
So I was just looking up what Ashton Jeanty's average rush yard per game is. 178. I'll take the over. I'll take over 130 and a half. And it could be, a kind of game where Ashton Jeanty runs for 150, 160, and Boise State still loses the football game. I think there's very much so a path where that happens, but I'll take the over. I mean, when in doubt, when Boise State's getting smacked in the mouth, who's getting the football? Ashton Jeanty is getting the football. So just based off of sheer, usage and just the sheer number of touches that I expect that he gets in this game, I think that'll it'll lead to 130. And honestly, I think I could lead to 130 pretty comfortably. So I'm with you. I will take the over on that. I will cash out on Ashton Jeanty over 130 and a half rushing yards. Riley Leonard over under 34 and a half rushing yards. Important to point out, Georgia had a little bit of trouble with mobile quarterbacks. I mean, Haynes King, Georgia Tech, he ran for like 650 yards in that game, it felt like. Jalen Milroe in that Alabama matchup earlier in the season, in the first half, Jalen Milroe could do whatever he wanted with his legs. So this Georgia defense, as good as they are and as good as they can be, have struggled against mobile quarterbacks.
Yeah, I'm absolutely taking this. I'm cashing this out. And part of this, let me go back to this and give you some numbers real quick that I think are important. I'll just read these off real quick. 11, 12, 11, 10, 10, 13, 12, 11, 11, 12. Those are rushing attempts by Riley Leonard in those games over the course of the season. In fact, for the majority of the season, there was only 4 games where he had 3 games where he had single digits in carries. So when you think about it that way, you're talking about, will he average 3 yards a carry? Because he's going to carry the ball at least 10 times. The answer to that is clearly yes. So to me, they're going to have to rely on Riley Leonard's legs. That's going to be part of what tries to keep these drives going. They're going to have to see if he can get some opportunities to make some plays. I think the pressure on Riley Leonard is to be aggressive and smart all at the same time. He's got to be aggressive with his legs, but also you can't take a hit that knocks you out of the game. He's got to be aggressive in trying to move the markers, but he also can't throw the ball into dangerous territory. So I think it's an interesting line for Riley Leonard. He's going to have to play a very smart football game. But I do believe, especially the fact that Georgia defense is so good, they're going to have him running around. Yeah, he's going to end up with 12 or 13 carries, which puts him, I'm cashing that out because it puts him over 30 yards for sure.
If this was the Caroline Fenton Sportsbook, and look, the Las Vegas Sportsbooks are much smarter than the Caroline Fenton Sportsbook. I know that. I acknowledge that. I would set my Riley Leonard over under rushing yard total at like 50. And I would still probably lean a little bit over. So I'm with you on that one. I'm going to take Riley Leonard over 34 and a half rushing yards just because that's Notre Dame's offense. And we know that's what their offensive coordinator Mike Denbrock is so good at doing is just scheming up runs for their quarterback. And also because Georgia's defense has struggled a bit against mobile quarterbacks. Last one, Will Howard over under 250 passing yards.
That's funny because I was going to ask if you wanted to get a Will Howard interception over under on there. Under 250 passing yards. I'll take the under because I think the path to victory for Ohio State is to try and run the ball a lot. So I'll take the under on this. Also, I was wrong. I will wave the I was wrong flag. Ohio State fans, you can crush me. I was wrong. I picked Tennessee to win the game because I needed an upset somewhere. I was never passionate about that. I don't really care one way or the other. But what I was wrong about in that game was Will Howard came out and played. Like, Will Howard was really good in that game. I still think the path to winning is taking the ball out of his hands if you can. That's not the way they approached the early portion of that game. So I was wrong. Let's see if they continue to make Will Howard Dan Marino part 2. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think they're going to run the ball. So I would take the under on 250 passing yards, and I will take I just think whatever the interception number is, I'll try and look it up real quick. I would take the over. Where are you on 250 passing yards?
I would lean just a smidge over, like a 260-yard passing day for Will Howard. I don't expect Will Howard to throw the ball 40 times for 450 yards. I would lean over, and if the interception total is set at 0.5, I'll take the over. You talk about the Tennessee game. Will Howard had, I think, his best passing day all season long. He still threw a pick in that game. And look, it was tipped in the end zone, and it was a very close call. Like, the refs debated it and reviewed it several times of, was his foot down? And honestly, I didn't really think it was. I didn't really think it should have been called an interception, but an interception is an interception. And we've seen Will Howard throw a lot of them so far this season. And against this Oregon defense, I would take the over at 0.5. I would take the under at 1.5.
Now, look at that. I would take the over on 1.5. I think this is a 2-pick game. Well, I still believe Oregon's going to win this. I picked Oregon preseason to win my national championship, and before the college football playoff, I picked them also. I think they're going to win this game, and I think it's the 2 picks from Will Howard that contribute to that.
This feels like the kind of game of, the quarterback that throws more interceptions, that's the team that loses. Or the quarterback that makes more mistakes, that's the team that loses. The team that misses a field goal or goes for 2 and doesn't get it, like, that's the difference in this game. I don't think that this is going to be the kind of, Carson Beck throws 3 picks and still beats Texas kind of game. This is tiny margins.
All right, so then give me this. I know we got to get out of here, but give me this. We didn't do this. All right, give me your winner and your final score prediction on each of them. We'll go first with Ohio State, Oregon. I've got Oregon winning, I'll say 41-31. 41-31, I'll take.
I'll take Oregon to win at 38-35 and it's a tie game going into the final few seconds, and a walk-off field goal wins it. I think that's that kind of game. It's going to be so incredibly close. So Ohio State right now, it's Sunday morning. So today, Ohio State is a 2.5-point favorite. That spread, at least to my knowledge, has grown because Ohio State opened as 1.5-point favorites. I'm going to take Oregon plus the 2.5. I would take Oregon to win outright. But we'll start with the beginning of the slate. Penn State at Boise State. Penn State 11.5-point favorites. Who do you like to win? Score prediction.
Yeah, Penn State rolls. I take Penn State with the points, even though it's a beefy point total. And the same thing, I'm going to say that's a 35-17 sort of game.
That's a beefy point total. It's too much for me to bite on. I'll take Boise State to cover the 11.5, but I do think that Penn State wins and wins comfortably. I just don't know. And look, I know the Big Ten championship game is probably an outlier in this conversation. I don't know how much I can trust Penn State to put up enough points to cover an 11.5-point spread. So I'll take Penn State to cover. I'll take Penn State to win it, though. I think it's going to be low scoring. I don't think Mattis Maxson gives Penn State as many opportunities as Kevin Jennings did when Penn State played SMU. So I'll say low scoring and Penn State wins it. I'll say 27-17. So Boise State's able to cover, but Penn State still wins comfortably. Another beefy spread. Texas, 12.5-point favorites over Arizona State. Fitz, same logic here. I'm going to take Arizona State to cover the 12.5, but I think Texas wins.
I'm going to take Texas to cover, and this game's over midway through the third quarter. I'll say 38-21 in a game that didn't feel that close. I have no hope on these games for them being good. I feel terrible about this.
That's your college football Scrooge.
Yeah,
just
I am.
Sucking all the fun out of all these games. I do feel, and look, I picked Tennessee to beat Ohio State as well last week because I thought surely we're going to have an upset somewhere. Surely something that Vegas doesn't expect to happen happens. Obviously that didn't happen. We're not going to have another week of blowouts or several blowouts. We can't. Like, this college football season has been too weird and too wacky for things to happen like we expect them to. So I will take Texas to cover the spread. I don't know if Texas is going to be able to put up that many points. I'll say Texas wins 28-21 in a much closer game than we all anticipate. We picked Ohio State, Oregon. I'm pumped for that game. I'm also pumped for Notre Dame, Georgia in the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. Georgia, narrow 1.5-point favorites. I'm taking Notre Dame to win. I'm taking Notre Dame to win 28-24.
Okay. I am taking Notre Dame to win also. I will take Notre Dame to win, let's say 28-17. 28-14. Not a lot of offense in that one.
Oh, only
Georgia
14
fans are gonna
points.
murder me. Yeah.
Kirby Smart is listening.
You know
'cause
what?
I know he loves the show.
28-17. I'll give it 28-17. They'll get an extra
You're throwing at least
few points in.
a little bit of a bone there.
Extra field goal comes in there somewhere.
But don't we do this every time? Don't we count Georgia out in a big game and then we're proven wrong because Kirby Smart's their head coach?
Yeah, but also like this is the playoff of narrative killers. Look, James Franklin won a big game. All right. We've already seen
Ryan Day won a big game.
If we look back at the first round of the playoffs and we're being honest, like really honest with ourselves, they were all simple to see. And if there's any theme for me in this one, like I'm just going to stick with simple. Like like I look at this, I see this, it makes sense. That was the result in the first round. It'll be the result in the second round. When we're hanging out on New Year's night after the third game, we're going to be sitting here saying, I cannot wait for all of the people yelling and screaming that college football playoff expansion was a bad idea and only 4 teams belong in. But the good news is I think we'll get great games after that. The Final Four is going to be fiery.
And we're going to get 2 great games, I do think, on Saturday night: Oregon, Ohio State, and Notre Dame, Georgia. I think we will. We'll at least get one great game. I hope so. Watch that be a blowout. Watch that one game be an absolute blowout, and all the rest go to like double overtime.
I mean, Ohio State, Tennessee was supposed to be the one game last weekend we could count on. Good God.
And that game was over in the first 10 minutes.
Yeah.
Like midway through the first quarter, I was like, okay, I have seen all I needed to see. So we'll be back on New Year's Eve night. I don't even know what day of the week that is. I haven't been able to keep track of the day of the week over the last week and a half. So whatever day New Year's Eve is, I think is it Tuesday?
Tuesday's New Year's Eve.
Tuesday. Okay, great. We'll see you on Tuesday because we'll have an immediate reaction to our thoughts on all the action from Boise State and Penn State. I'll be there at the Fiesta Bowl in Phoenix, so I'm very, very excited for it. So we'll be back then, and we will also be back Wednesday, New Year's Day, for a full reaction from the other 3 games in the second round of the college football playoffs. So we'll see you back right here. He's Jason Fitz. You can follow him on Twitter at Jason Fitz. I'm at Caroline Fenton 1. Always appreciate y'all for stopping by the podcast. So give us a like, give us a subscribe, give us a review, give us a comment, all the great things. Tell your friends about it. Tell your enemies about it. Tell Ashton Jeanty about it because we love Ashton Jeanty here on the program.
Do love Ashton Jeanty. Don't tell Georgia fans. They're going to be mad at me.
Georgia fans are always mad about something. So it's okay. That's okay. We'll be back on Tuesday night. Penn State, Boise State reaction. We're out.